Decameron Tales. Come closer, listen. We are locked in a time of plague. Corvid. The name has a malicious ring to it. Corona, a crown on some evil crow, ominous. Crowing, a warning through associations of meanings. We deal in words. As a group, we all read and write. We cannot sit in a shared garden, but in virtual reality we can tell our tales. Listen. Back at the beginning of this virus, we decided to read some of Boccaccio's The Decameron. Giovanni Boccaccio lived in the 14th century, at the beginning of the Italian Renaissance, and along with Dante and Petrarch, he was one of the masters of modern Italian literature. They chose to write in the contemporary Italian of the day. The Decameron was an inspiration for Chaucer, who met Boccaccio, and for Shakespeare, who, like other writers, took some of his themes from Boccaccio's tales. Imagine an Italian landscape where, for pleasant recreation, a group of 7 women and 10 men are met together. They are escaping from the horror of plague which is raging in their city of Florence. They represent an ideal of harmonious living and good governance, but the stories they tell are a mixture of mischief, fortune, licentiousness, and judgment. The idea of an escape is formulated by Pampinea when she meets with her friends within the courtyard of Santa Novella. This is a sacred and quiet place where they have met to sit and discuss their fate. They decide to travel to places of safety, free from all danger of sickness, where they can find rural harmony in clean air, morality, and order. For good governance, they propose to elect a queen or a king for each new day, who will host and direct their group. Every day, the group will each one tell a tale, decided by their host to be under a certain heading, so that in 10 days, 100 stories will have been told. The meaning of Decameron is 10 days. Does it suggest to you some rather tedious tracts on righteous behaviour? Far from it. We found that the stories were full of enjoyed sex and trickery, as well as faithful love, both fulfilled and tragic. As in Aesop's fables, tables are turned and the wrongdoer chastised. Many known tricks are used, such as rings and handkerchiefs falling into the wrong hands, or the wrong woman slips into her true love's bed and thereby claims him in marriage. And in a time when women were chattels of their father or husband, it takes a woman's wit and intelligence to turn the tables to her advantage. Here's an example. A supposed deaf mute enters a nunnery to be engaged as a gardener. Here, the young nuns, locked away in the barren convent, take matters into their own hands when they see a virile man. They seek to encourage this gardener to till and tend their bodies as he does the soil, and they take turns to have sex with him. The abbess finds out and does a deal with the gardener, who isn't a deaf mute after all, saying, "I won't tell if you don't," and proceeds to enjoy his services too, and thus the unnatural lockdown of the garden becomes beautifully harvested. And most importantly, the women for once are in control of their bodies and pleasure. The Garden of Paradise is a reflection of Eden. It is an ideal of recreating and sustaining life. Boccaccio's harmonious company seek refuge. They sing and dance together, and then sit round the eternal fountain, where their storytellings of fate and fortune find an order away from the background of horrific plague. Our modern tales seek to replicate the consequences of vice or virtue with a touch of humour. Imagine us telling stories. Let's go to work in our virtual garden. Let's banish the miserable crow.
Having her cake and eating it. In the time of lockdown, Maya and Samuel met on a Facebook group for disgruntled local residents. Complaints were racketed about, like dog-chewed tennis balls. Speaking of dogs, something really must be done with the owners of the beasts that foul our pavements. But with the corona spring, concerns turned inward. Exactly how many rainbows was acceptable to display in one's living room window? We will judge our non-nurse clapping neighbours, won't we? For heaven's sake, was ordering a takeaway charitable or reckless in the current climate? And it was into this divisive discussion that Maya and Samuel waded. Supporting local business was imperative. They found themselves both interjecting one day. Maya took an instant shine to the profile photo of this man, so vehemently of her own opinion. Two kindred spirits advocating for the surrounding stocks of yuksung, wonton, sheik and shami kebabs to be kept flowing. One Tuesday evening, or was it Wednesday? Couldn't have been Thursday. That's when Maya vuvuzela'd in the street. Anyway, she'd just finished a YouTube yoga session and was feeling a little more flexible, a little more frisky, a little more yummy than the norm. So she clicked on Samuel's face and sent him a DM. From there, things escalated between them like the speed and spread of the virus. 1 minute they were strangers, the next they were FaceTiming all hours of the night. They believed righteously that they should set an example of helping out the little guy, and so it was decided to order a regular supply of cakes for themselves from a selection of deserving independent bakeries. One Friday night, or was it Saturday? Couldn't have been Sunday, as that's when Maya dressed up as Cleopatra for her virtual house party. Anyhow, she'd just finished a Zoom Zumba and was feeling quite loose, quite free, quite fresh, when she arrived upon an idea. It was not enough to simply order the cakes. They must take things to the next level. They must begin to eat their cakes in front of each other. When she made this suggestion to Samuel, he became excited and immediately consented. A simple eclair was the first viewing. And it wasn't long before politeness was put to bed in their dimly lit kitchens. They devoured the choux pastries, licking the chocolate from their lips and sucking the cream from their fingers. Their phones projecting pixels, forming visions of the other's great enjoyment. At first, this was all it was, a single spoil mutually consumed a couple of times a week. But it became apparent very quickly that this was not enough for Maya. She had been furloughed, and all she could think about was when she could get her next fix. Samuel, however, was still working from home, and the frequency they had established suited him perfectly. He became perturbed by Maya's appetite. It soon had to be every evening, then every day, then any hour of any day or night, messages would light up his screen. It was time to sample the blondies, the brownies, the cardamom nut, the cinnamon bun, the blueberry and thyme laminated brioche. On conference calls, voice notes urged him to try a passion fruit cruffin. At first light, his phone buzzed, demanding a Danish dulce de leche. Last thing at night, images of pastilla de natas would beg for him. Maya was insatiable. He told her no. No more. He was done. They had come to the end of the road.
So this one is called Verbosity, a tale of words. 2020, Black Lives Matter. Jesus was not white. Stuck indoors, lockdown, coronavirus, pandemic, COVID-19, a madman shouting his mouth off. The China, Chinese flu, Chinese plague, Kung flu, the gift from China. So I said to my people, slow the testing down. Testing is frankly overrated. Fake news, highest numbers of death in the world. Wash your hands. Stop counting. Counting increases the numbers. African Americans, I can't breathe. Build that wall. Drink or inject bleach. Misinformation. Freedom of speech, unprecedented times, positive testing, increased cases, new outbreak, 111. Contact less contact, no contact. Panic buying pasta, no toilet rolls, roadside drop-off. Face coverings, high risk, clinically vulnerable, extremely clinically vulnerable, asymptomatic, herd immunity, get it over with, solidarity. No justice, no peace, no mass protests. Keep your distance. Walk, cycle, or drive. Working from home, don't go to work. Go to work, no commuting. Avoid public transport. Doctors closed, universities closed, libraries closed, shops closed, restaurants closed, banks closed, cashless society, online surgery, online courses, virtual tutorials, increased online library resources, students stressed out. They want to go back to work, to actual lecture rooms. They want to be in person with their TAs and the professors learning in person. Avoid mass gatherings. PPE, ICU bed shortage, test and trace, track and trace. At high risk letter from the NHS. Moderate risk of transmission, BAME. Stay home, save lives. Do not leave home if you or someone you live with has any of the following symptoms: a high temperature, a new continuous cough, or loss of or change to your sense of smell or taste. Staycation, 14-day quarantine, air bridges, traffic lights, travel corridors, sanitizers. 70 plus, wash your hands. 20 seconds or happy birthday twice. Illegal parties. Do not meet friends or family not from your own household. Groups of 6, family and friends, support bubbles, elbow to elbow, take a knee, 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Animals and thugs. Wash your hands. Schools closed, schools open, schools closed. No vaccine. I can't breathe. Unyielding knee, symptomatic. Thursday, 2000 hours, BST, happy clapping. NHS 72nd birth and anniversary. Unfairly disadvantaged, deprived, disparity, occupation, ethnicity, inequality, ageism, sexism, location, Obamacare. National Health Service staff get massive gratitude.
Thank you. Pesto. For Isabel, sweet Isabel will die a death too lone and incomplete. Now they have taken away her basil sweet. From Isabella and the Pot of Basil, verse 61 by John Keats. What to do about Liza? All her life she had lain awake and overheard the susurri from below. Papa would close up after midnight, sit with Mama a while at a red checked table, and loosen his tongue with a few glasses of honey shiny grappa. The girl is soft in the head. It must come from your side. Never any Patsy in the Cavallaro family. Hush, Vincenzo, Mama would say. She feels things deeply. What does a man know of such things? Now they were gone, and it was her big brothers, Vinny, Salvo, and Joey, who sat late at night and debated the Liza problem. The old-fashioned restaurant near the corner of Mulberry and Canal, not far from Umberto's, where the Irishman shot crazy Joe Gallo, needed a serious injection of cash, and the guys just didn't have it. I was kind of hoping that schmuck Tony Russo might fall for her. Those Russos are in demolition. They got big dough. Nah, he caught on she was as crazy as a poke crab. We'll have to try the Gambinos before they realise. Her head's in the clouds with all that play acting and hanging around Broadway. She thinks she's Sophia Loren. But boy, can she cook. You taste that aubergine caponata tonight? Excelente. Little did they know that she and her Larry were going to elope. He'd got an aunt in Anchorage, Alaska, who'd take them in. It had been instant love from the moment she first saw him serve a pesce spada alla Siciliana with that white linen napkin folded delicately over his arm. But they did know. And one Friday night, Larry didn't show for work. Didn't show Saturday neither. Never showed again. Sleepless Liza must have wept the Mediterranean that week, and the Hudson River too. Her penne was troppo morbido, her eyes like empty clamshells. She could see a vision of Larry in her mind, his face tinged blue and his eyebrows coated with snow. Had he gone to Alaska without her? One evening she ran out of shrimp and opened the chest freezer in the basement. There he was, her handsome Larry, iced like a side of Sicilian black pig. She couldn't just leave him there in his pristine waiter's uniform. She fetched the cleaver she'd sharpened earlier for slicing ham hocks, took off his dark Montelucen head, wrapped it in a dish towel, and fled up to the rooftop garden to her herbs and tomatoes. In the far corner was a copper urn that her grandfather had brought over from Catania. She grew her basil in it. She clawed out some compost and lovingly planted Larry's head deep underneath and replaced the clumps of herb. The brothers were puzzled. Liza was on fire. No more moping over the waiter schmuck. The menus were the best they'd ever seen. Word was spreading. Punters were coming from Long Island, from Midtown. Even Sicilians were coming. There'd been a write-up in Manhattan Dining. She'd always made a fine pesto calabrese, but now even TripAdvisor was praising her basil delights. A perfect tagliatelle of cuttlefish with pesto, spectacular pesto alla trapanese, pesto with pistachio, pesto with cheese, rigatoni with tomatoes and pesto. But she was spending far too much time in between smoking and talking to herself up in that roof garden where she grew her bits and bobs. They couldn't afford for her to go patzer again. One night, when Liza was busy shucking scallops, Vinny snuck up there. Ugh, that smell was like the Bowery sewers, and it was coming straight out of Grandpa's urn. Larry was discovered. The three guys consigned him to New York Harbor that night to bobble with the fishes. That was the end of the pesto fest. Liza was back to looking like wilted asparagus. She struggled on, preparing a poor linguine alfredo and a worse mushroom risotto, but not a morsel passed her own redundant lips. The New York coroner listed the official cause of her death as anorexia nervosa. Vinny, Salvo, and Joey ended up on downtown garbage collection.
When an act of kindness has unforeseen consequences. Jessica had been looking forward to her 60th birthday celebration at a luxury country cottage with her 4 siblings and their partners, and her husband if he came back from India where he had gone to find himself, a process that was taking an inordinately long time. But the excitement of a family gathering, other than at a wedding or funeral, was fast fading as the weather forecast for the weekend turned increasingly dire. Thunderstorms, heavy rain and flood alerts. So much for picnics and barbecues. Her youngest sibling, Cindy, suggested postponing. Philip, the oldest, was worried about Wi-Fi coverage, and Alex, number 4, couldn't decide whether to invite his new boyfriend or not. Then, Thursday evening, the middle one, Beatrice, had thrown in another issue. I'm vegan. Since when? Monday. It's an important part of my new well-being regime. Oh, and Nicholas won't be arriving until Saturday afternoon, if at all. Jessica sighed. She had already done the Ocado order, so she called a friend. Alexa, what is the best meat substitute for vegans? Seitan. Seitan? Please explain. Seitan, a versatile protein from wheat dough. Okay, order enough Seitan to last the weekend. And Alexa, double the gin order. And tonics? No, just the gin. Jessica arrived at the cottage Friday morning to check that everything was in order. 20 minutes later, while she was having a pre-lunch glass of wine, the Ocado man turned up. As he was unloading the boxes, Jessica found herself staring at his muscular biceps, wondering what he would look like naked, a thought that never occurred during her usual weekly transaction. When he asked where she wanted it, she replied the kitchen table, and that was indeed where they had it. It was not an unpleasant experience. Cindy arrived next, looking rather flustered and dishevelled. My car broke down, she explained. The AA man, well, he was incredibly good looking. I don't know what happened. I couldn't stop myself. I practically tore his overalls off. Jessica nodded. I totally understand. Alex and his boyfriend turned up at tea time, and one look showed Jessica why they were later arriving than they'd said, followed shortly after by Philip and his wife, who headed straight to their bedroom saying they needed to freshen up. Jessica was pouring a large gin as an extremely loud clap of thunder shook the house, and Beatrice walked in. The causeway is flooding. We'll probably be stranded. Who are they? Jessica asked, pointing to 3 men standing behind Beatrice. One had bulging biceps, another had a large rip in his overall. The third, wearing a Gandhi-type loincloth and shawl, looked vaguely familiar. Their tents had blown away, so I said they could stay here until the storm passed. Welcome, Jessica said. Just as well I ordered extra gin and Satan.
On the dangers of vicarious living, there was a youth who, by his own reckoning, was ill-served by life, family and friends. He retreated into a cocoon of resentful listlessness, seeing himself as the victim of any who would beckon him out to study his lessons, take exercise in the golden summer sunshine, or, heaven forbid, a shower. Each day he would sleep until the afternoon, having stayed up until the early hours of the morning, playing online games such as Age of Conan and World of Warcraft, so that, like a lotus eater, he found consolation in dreams. For here, at the click of a mouse, he became an aristocratic shaman with prodigious levels of strength and agility, and talents that included subterfuge and deep stratagems. But the power he sought most was that of being able to cheat death. After one particularly long day and night of questing with an online crew of acquaintances who were agreeable because he did not have to meet them in person, he eventually collapsed of exhaustion as early-born, rosy-fingered dawn appeared. His mother found our hero unconscious in the wreckage of his bedroom, with the discarded remnants of the elixirs of fortune and elvin food, cans of Red Bull and empty packets of Jaffa cakes. He was lying face down with his arms outstretched, wearing the same pair of boxer shorts and dressing gown she'd observed him in 2 days before. At this, her choler rose up, and she started to shake him and shout, Jakey, Jakey, wake up! Look at the state of you and this room. But had she been able to see his face, buried deep in his pillow, then she would have observed signs of blissful REM sleep, for he had passed into a realm that was neither virtual nor real. He dreamt he was his avatar from the eastern land of Kitai, tall, erect, and powerful, in his dressing gown. In the world that lay before him, things were familiar, but misplaced. He saw the Temple of Mizra, with fire pits and dragons, and the local chippy from the end of his road. One of his questing companions passed by, tilting his helmet as his head toppled off his shoulders and rolled towards him. The head smiled and said, I've just been to the Temple of Mizra. It was mad. I lost my head, and winked at him. Our hero hesitated, caught in that moment when 2 contradictory thoughts demand simultaneous attention. concern for his decapitated comrade, and a question. Have you got it? Got what, Jakey? The power to cheat death. Cheat death? You're having a laugh, mate. You have to go to the temple for that. He beckoned with his eyes, while his torso affected a belly laugh. You'll have to be careful, though. She'll have you, the princess. Look what happened to me. Jakey considered his options. He had the sword of desolation with him and could deploy mind-numbing poison. But would that be enough? When all the armour he wore was his threadbare nightgown. He wanted the power to cheat death. He wanted it. Wasn't he gifted with deep stratagems? He would surprise her by going through the chippy. But could he pay the chippy man? The chippy man was surprisingly agreeable when he offered to settle his tab later. He sucked his teeth. What you think me chips made of, huh? The priestess was waiting for him between the pillars of the temple. An unearthly cackle erupted from her Medusa head. A great wave of paralyzing dread gripped him. You want the power to cheat death? She leapt over to him in an instant and grabbed him by his shoulders and lifted him up. Wake up, she shouted in his face. You want the power to cheat death when you haven't lived yet, Jakey?
Discontent and fortitude. Not far from here, there lived a woman who once wanted to be a man. She could see clearly, as she said to her cat, men have the better deal. Her cat looked back at her and shrugged his fur and yawned. The woman got up late each morning. There was no need to get out of bed early. Each day began the same, and the cat looked back at her and turned around. She got up late and went across to the mirror in the bathroom and stared. You're not a bit like a man, said the cat in his stare. She looked and hated what she saw. Her hair, her skin, her nose, her two small eyes, everything about her lacked a point. Pointless, she said. If I were a man, I wouldn't care. I would have a purpose and a role to play. Of course, the cat narrowed a look and washed. Every day she thought of washing, but what was the point? If I were a man, I could smell manly, and that would be a virile, healthy sweat. But as a woman, I just have embarrassing monthly smells and womanly stinks. Too true, purred her cat, just so, and settled his nose to his tail. Around mid-morning, the woman had had enough of her sweaty bed. She pulled on the same loose joggers as yesterday and the day before and the day before that, and then chose an even bigger baggy top to hide in. You know you can't hide, looked the cat. Everyone can see you've got fat breasts and an arse the size of Australia. She went to kick, but the cat sprang to the top of the wardrobe and looked down on her. He looked down as she looked down on her pathetic, female, useless self. Another day locked up in her body went fast and slowly by. She ate, and the cat ate, demanding food between sleeps. She stared out of the window at the rain and chewed a strand of hair. She thought, if I were a man, I could shave my square-cut jaw, slip back my short-cut hair and admire my reflection. The cat looked. Too soon came the night. The dark encircled the house. The door remained chained and the post unopened. The woman curled in her chair, nursed her head, the glass beside her empty again, unfulfilled. Then the cat sauntered by, flaunting his tail, stretching his paws, and he said archly, a full open woman like yourself should make a perfect human being. Stop wanting something or other. Just be. Later, the woman washed her face, stretched, unlocked, and went out. The moon burned like a headlight. She licked her lips. Her eyes widened. Something in the bushes moved. There was a smell she recognised. She tensed. "Sorry," the voice called. "Just putting out the rubbish." "Oh, me too," she half lied. He came forward, thin as a whistle, with a sleek mouth that bled as if singing. "How's it going?" he asked. She shrugged. "Do you ever wish you were someone else in another time and body?" he asked. She half smiled. She threw back. "Do you?" "Oh, it's all right for women," he said. "You've just got to be there." The cat in the background looked up and twitched his tail, then interjected, "The trouble is that you think too much. We animals can't tell what we are unless we sniff and lift our tails. We just wear our fur, unknowing and uncaring how we look." The cat had a point. The man and the woman stood. "I like that top," he said. "It suits you. Do you think it would suit me?" "I'll give you the name of the outlet," she said. "Sure, it's comfortable. You'd look good." "I'd maybe get it in a different colour," he said. "Sure," she said. "Please yourself. Treat yourself." "Nice talking," they said simultaneously. "See you around." And they smiled, identical smiles. The cat tensed, lashed its tail, pricked ears, hesitated, then sprang.
Yes. In which pretension is punished by ridicule. There was once a man who lived in Moseley who was, according to himself, a great connoisseur of contemporary art. This man, who called himself Compton Winyates, had actually been named Cyril Wormold by his parents, a respectable couple of the lower middle classes who owned a static caravan in Worthing and a 2-bedroom Exeter house in Shirley. Compton Winyates, however, lived in an artfully shabby flat on Salisbury Road and liked to meet young up-and-coming artists in a collective opposite Moseley Baths, where he would promise them an exhibition at the Icon Gallery or similar. They would pay for his food and substantial amounts of drink before he fleeced them of small amounts of money. "I have inadvertently left my wallet at home, and my angina will not allow me to walk. Taxi?" Of course. The exhibitions never happened, although some of the most attractive of the young artists, girls as well as boys, were somehow induced to go to bed with him. He also took from them various pieces of their work, which he sold on, pocketing most of the money himself. Now, it so happened that a group of these young artists met at the Hare and Hounds, where they had simultaneously gathered for a gig. Talking together, they realised that they had in common, besides a liking for real ale and indie music, an acquaintance with Compton Winyates, and had all been his victims. They devised a plan to trick him and perhaps gain some recompense for their misplaced generosity. One of the group, graphic designer, produced a series of posters advertising a show by a conceptual artist called Judy von Bedoeper. Another, skilled in IT and an influencer, set up fake YouTube, Twitter, Facebook and Instagram accounts in that name. The sculptor, who lived in a warehouse, agreed to set it up as a studio space. Another, who was friendly with the editor of an online events magazine, persuaded her to place spoof reviews of the artist in it. Meeting Compton Winyates in his usual hangouts over the next week or so, they all talked about the artist, who they described in such glowing terms that Winyates was gradually taken in and expressed a desire to meet her and to see some of her work. "Alas," one of the conspirators said, "there are no tickets left for this strictly limited view before she returns to her native Berlin." This only made Winyates more keen to see the exhibition, which was just what the conspirators had hoped. One of them approached Winyates and, in the manner of a man who has a secret, offered to obtain a ticket for the show, which, as it was sold out, would command a premium. However, he disclosed, with the ticket would come a meeting with the artist, who was very voluptuous and free-spirited to boot, and the opportunity to buy a piece of her art at a favourable price, provided the money was paid up front. Compton Wynyates was by this time slavering at the thought of meeting this artist, and desperate that he might miss out on the show of the season, he went home and scraped together the money by begging, borrowing and stealing, and rushed as far as his corpulent figure would allow to the Prince of Wales to hand it over. The next evening he was taken to the warehouse. The room was in darkness, which, he'd been told, was part of the experience. As soon as he was inside, the conspirators locked the door and watched the proceedings via a video cam from the bar of the Spotted Dog opposite. Inside the warehouse, a video screen flashed into life. In the light emitted, Wynyates could see that the space was empty. On the screen appeared the words, "Seen and unseen," followed by Jude von Beduper. As the horrified Wynyates watched, the letters of the name rearranged themselves into a sentence.
Massive incarceration, isolation, self-isolation, 2 meters apart, self-shielding, social distancing, masks, I can't breathe, asphyxiation, second spike, taking liberties, flouting social distancing, mingling too much, not observing isolation, crapping on the beach, drive-ins, queues, virtual football, Zoom and gloom, exercise in the park, exercise online, digital infrastructure for the long term. You've been furloughed. Wash your hands. Upsurge in internet use, click and collect, cloud-based solutions, death toll rises, 6 feet apart or under. Mourners are advised not to take part in rituals or practices that bring them into close contact with the deceased. Cough into your elbow. Pubs closed, alcohol, alcoholics, depression, mental exhaustion. Working from home will become a sustained fixture of working life. George Floyd, numbers increasing exponentially. When the looting starts, the shooting starts. Socializing safely outdoors, wear facial cover, stay alert, save and protect, death in police custody, global outcry, police brutality, civil rights, excessive use of force, taser, the new normal, economic crisis, bake bread. Grow your own vegetables, community, volunteering, NHS, service providers, care workers, key workers, essential workers, doctors, cleaners, teachers, vital roles, refuse collectors, bus drivers, taxi drivers, delivery drivers, reduction in pollution, reduction in free movement, reduction in fuel consumption, reduction in production, gross domestic product. Defund Wuhan. Woke. I have a dream. Statues fall from their pedestals. King Leopold II, Edward Colston, Robert E. Lee, Gone with the Wind. Glastonbury Festival, Don't Stand So Close to Me, I Can't Breathe. Gatherings of more than 30 people will be prohibited, apart from some limited circumstances to be set out in law. Wash your hands. 4-day week to boost economy. A change is going to come, 4th of July. A&E doctors plead with England's pubgoers not to get plastered. Food parcels, 50% off Monday to Wednesday. Eat out to help out. Wear a mask, £100 fine. Watch this space over the rainbow.